Hello and welcome or welcome back to the Parisian Mall, the channel dedicated to giving you all the insights and information about how to move to Paris based on the processes that I had to put into place in order to move to Paris. So just to give you a little bit of context, I'm Vittoria and I'm an Italian girl that exactly 1 year ago decided to move to Paris without having a single idea of how to actually do it. So in these videos, I am going to explain to you all the things that I had to concretely put into place, starting from the job research to all the processes in order to become a Parisian. So in my previous videos, we talked about how to find a job in Paris, the elements to consider when evaluating a job offer in Paris. And in this video, we're going to focus on the list of documents that I was asked by the company when I accepted the job offer and the company needed to create my job contract. So the reason I decided to do this video is because, of course, it's normal when you change job and you reach the end of the recruiting process and you end up accepting the final offer. Usually you are then contacted by human resources in order to provide all the documents they will need to create your official job contract. Now, in my specific case, I was not aware of the kind of documents they were about to ask me. Again, just as a specific, I'm an Italian citizen, meaning that I'm a European Union citizen, and so I already knew back at the time that I was allowed to work and live in France without specific permits, because of course my passport is already a valid document for me to work and live in France. But the problem is that no matter what, French companies need specific documents that are French documents, and that I of course not only didn't have back at the time, but I was absolutely not aware of what they were. I never heard of them in my whole life. So I do still remember the exact moment I received the email from Human Resources with all the list of documents they needed to proactively create my contract. And I read this list and I said, amazing, I have like 2 documents I can send. The rest, I have no idea what it is. And so today we are going to deep dive into this list of documents because I went back looking for that specific email with the list of elements that were required, and I'm going to list them all, and then we're going to focus on the problematic ones, so the documents that I didn't have and the kind of way I communicated with the company in order to find a solution to that. So let's get right into it. Okay, so the first element of the list is the identity card or passport. Now, luckily, there was no problem related to this point because, of course, I had both of them, so both the identity card and the passport. Now, just as a specific, again, I am speaking as a European citizen, so I always recommend you to go and check the specific documents you may need to work and live in France. But for people living in one of the European Union countries, usually your identity card is absolutely valid, and so you can use it, or you can use your passport. Now, me personally, I always prefer to use the passport, also when I travel, and also when I travel within Europe, because it's faster, it's easier, and I don't know, my personal preference is the passport. And then the Carte Vitale, I will tell you what all these elements are, of course. So the Carte Vitale, the confirmation of registration to the Social Security, the residence permit, the RIB is the bank account, the French bank account indication, my driving license, address, telephone number, email address, the surname, name, and phone number of the person that the company can contact in case of emergency. And the last element is the form of registration to the Mutuelle, not only filled in, but also signed. Now, I will start with the elements that didn't carry with them any problem, and then we will focus on the ones that actually carried a lot of problems. So again, starting from the identity card or passport, no problem with that. I had my document. And then for the residence permit, I had not to provide a residence permit because my passport itself is a valid document for me to freely work and live in France. Because again, being a European Union citizen, I can do that. So I don't have to provide an actual residence permit. But again, based on your specific situation, go and check what you need to provide. And then my driving license, not a problem because the Italian driving license is valid in France, so I can drive in France with my Italian driving license, and so the company may need it in case you need to move around for work with your car or with the company car. And then the email address, so they want to confirm what is the email address you want to use for all the formal communication, so for example the job contract. Name, surname and phone number of the person to contact in case of emergency, and this is very important, so I highly recommend you give the contact of someone that ideally speaks French, because of course in case of emergency it would be quicker to understand what is the problem and how they can help you. But of course what I would suggest is at least to pick someone that can speak English, of course, and that in case of emergency can communicate freely with the company and understand what's going on, because that's the core of the communication. Now, these were all the information that I had and that I could provide, meaning that for the main documents and the most important documents I had nothing. And so let's get right into the description of these single elements and how I kind of tried to put into place and start the bureaucratic process to activate them all. So at the very first place, we have the Carte Vitale. Now, I looked at the list and I said, what is a Carte Vitale? Because I never heard of it. So the Carte Vitale, basically, it's a card that is issued after you have registered to the Social Security. So that's also the reason why the second and the third points are connected between them. So the Carte Vitale and the Attestation CPAM. So CPAM is the acronym for Caisse Primaire d'Assurance Maladie, which is the Social Security, so the health insurance. And as I briefly anticipated in my previous video, I briefly spoke about how the Social Security system works in France, so how the healthcare works in France. Social Security is public, universal, but also mandatory, meaning that as soon as you move to France, you need to register to the Assurance Maladie in order to obtain a Social Security number, which is also mandatory for you to be covered by the national health insurance. Now, one of the first things that you need to do as soon as you move is to provide all the documents needed in order to be registered to the healthcare system. And once you have been registered, a Social Security number will be issued, and then they will create a Carte Vitale, meaning the health card that you will receive at home, and you will see that written on the Carte Vitale there is your Social Security number. So they're actually strictly connected. Now, of course, back at the time, I was still living in Italy, so I hadn't moved to France yet, because for me, my priority was to find a job. So in my head, the chronological order of things was finding a job, and then once I have found a job, I can then focus on all the rest, meaning finding a home, opening a bank account, creating a French phone number. So all these things were after the job contract. But the problem is that I didn't consider that the company would have needed these documents in order to create the job contract. So basically what happened is when I saw that the company needed the Carte Vitale and the confirmation that I have been registered to the Assurance Maladie, of course I went online and I looked for ways where I could actually require to be registered to the healthcare system in France. The funny thing is that when I went on the website of the Assurance Maladie and I checked all the documents that I needed to provide in order to be registered to the Social Security, there was a list of documents that, again, I didn't have. Because the documents required were not only my identity card or passport, but the problem is that the Assurance Maladie required for me to upload a document that could justify the reason why I was actually asking to be registered to the Assurance Maladie, meaning the contract, the job contract. So I found myself in this kind of path where the company needed my Social Security number to create the contract, but the Social Security needed the contract to provide the Social Security number. So I was actually stuck in this process, and that's when I started to speak with the company saying, okay, you guys, we are in this situation, so I would love to be able to provide you these documents, but I literally cannot proceed in my request because I need this specific document to proceed. And so one thing that I want to be very clear about, so it may be that you end up working for companies that don't require all these documents. You may end up working for companies that ask you for more documents. So my suggestion is always to try to be as open in the communication as possible with the company and be very proactive in telling them what is the problem you are facing and how you can maybe try to find a solution together. So my focus was on finding a way to get these social security number. So I was pretty sure there needed to be a way for companies to require a social security number in case they want to hire someone who still hasn't moved to France. And I ended up on a specific section of the French government website dedicated exactly to these kind of situations. The company could create an account and activate the whole process to require a social security number for a person they were about to hire. Now, I'm not going super in depth with this specific process because I'm preparing a dedicated video to how to register to the Social Security, and I will explain all this process in that specific video. But just for the purpose of this video, this section on the French government website is going to remove the problem of providing the contract, because of course, in case it's the company that asks for the creation of a Social Security number for one of their future employee, the assurance maladie, of course, doesn't need the proof of why they are requiring the Social Security number because it's automatic. And this specific process was actually connected to the last element of the list, which was the form in order to be affiliated to the company's Mutuelle. So again, as previously mentioned, in France, companies provide these complementary health insurances for their employees, and you have to fill in the form as soon as you are hired because of course they will make sure that you are registered to their complementary health insurance as soon as you start working for the company. But when I opened the form in order to fill it in, of course, again, I found myself facing the fact that I had no information that I could provide inside this form apart from my name, surname, and email, because they required a French phone number, which I didn't have, a French address, which I didn't have, and most importantly, the social security number, which I still didn't have. So the registration to the assurance maladie was, of course, the first step in order to then be allowed to provide the other two documents. The problem is that when they activated the process, another problem came into place. But before getting into that, I wanted to give you an insight and an advice. One of the documents that the assurance maladie required in order to ask for a social security number to be issued was a birth certificate. Now, what I recommend is if you are still in your hometown or in your home country, it's better for you to take care of this specific document while you are still living in your home country, because that would make it easier. Now, I don't know how it works in the different countries of European Union or internationally, but what I know is that in Italy I could take appointment with my hometown registry office and ask for the birth certificate in the European model translated in French, because of course it was a document that I was supposed to then forward to the French authorities, and so they needed to understand what was written in the certificate. So I highly recommend to go and check how you need to proceed in order to require a birth certificate translated in French, because that is going to be mandatory not only if you are going to activate the process to ask for a social security number, but also in case it's the company itself that proceeds requiring your social security number to be issued. Okay, so now we can go on with our list and we can directly go and speak about the other problem that came out from the process that we were together with the company activating to require a social security number, which is the French bank account. So when I first read this list of elements and I realized that the company needed a French bank account to be indicated, I imagined that they needed it in order to proceed with the monthly bank transfers for my salary. So the very first thing that I did was I called my Italian bank and I asked them if giving my Italian bank account indication to a French company was going to be a problem for them in terms of, for example, extra commissions when they were making the bank transfer on an Italian bank account. And my Italian bank at the time, they said, no, it's not going to be a problem because Italy and France, they both belong to the CEPA area, which is the area of payments and transactions made in euro currency. So they said that a French company shouldn't have any problem in doing a bank transfer on an Italian bank account. But of course, they told me check with the company because of course, we don't know if fiscally speaking, in terms of taxes, they may have like some additional things to consider. So what I highly recommend again is to speak with the company and understand if for them it's okay if you provide your home country bank account. Now, in my case, the problem was for the social security number, because as I previously mentioned in the video related to the elements to consider when evaluating a job offer in Paris, the social security system and also the complementary health insurances covers certain amounts of medical expenses. Now, these medical expenses are reimbursed directly on your bank account. And this is the reason why when asking for a social security number to be created, the assurance maladie, so the social security, wants to already have the indication of a French bank account, which is the bank bank account where they will give you back the money you spent on medical expenses. Now, and that opened for me the problem of finding a French bank that allowed me to create a bank account when I was still living in Italy. And actually, the problem was not the distance, because a lot of French banks that I contacted told me that there was no problem in opening an online bank account, because a lot of banks right now give that possibility, and there are also a lot of online-only banks. The problem was that none of these banks was going to open a bank account if I couldn't provide a French address. And at the time, I still didn't know where I was about to live. So what I can recommend you based on my experience is if you know someone that lives in France and that could host you, at least for the very first period, France gives this possibility to issue a déclaration d'hébergement, which is literally a hosting declaration where basically you fill in a form, and online you can find a lot of examples of this kind of form, giving all the indications they require, meaning name, surname, and address of the person who is going to host you. And you also have to attach the identity card of this person and their electricity bill where their name appears connected to the address, because if not, of course, everybody could indicate whatever address they want to. So basically, the hosting declaration is something that you could pursue if you have a good relationship with the person and you trust them, of course, because you have to consider that if you're going to use the hosting declaration to require a social security number to be issued, of course, the social security from that moment on will connect that address to you and will send over every single mail communication to that address. Like, for example, the Carte Vitale. So always make sure you indicate the address of someone you trust and that you know will give you the mail that arrives for you. Also, because if you have this hosting declaration, you could also open a bank account online, because the hosting declaration is a valid document for French banks to open a bank account with your name. So actually that would help you solve these two problems at once. But if you don't know anybody in France and you cannot ask anybody to be hosted, what I can suggest you, at least for the very first period, is to find a structure, like it could be a hotel, a hostel, or like short-term rentals. Like, find a solution that could give you an address, a French address, that you could then communicate either to the assurance maladie directly, either to the company if the company is taking care of the social security number, and also to a French bank, in order to solve these problems together. Now, if you decide to pursue this option and, for example, book a short-term rental or a hostel or a bed and breakfast for the first period, what I recommend is to contact the structure itself and ask if they are willing to provide a proof of address for you. Because even though you find this temporary solution, while they will not be available to provide you a proof of address, it's actually going to be very useless. So you need to find a solution that could provide you a proof of address, even just for 1 month or 2 months, because then you can always change the address as soon as you have found your more permanent solution. But yes, at least for the beginning, my suggestion is to find a way to have a French address. Now, again, this was my personal experience. There may be companies that do not need a social security number to be issued before hiring you, because I got to know people and got to meet people that told me that they proceeded requiring the social security number after a few months they moved to France. So it always depends on the specific situation, but it's just to let you know that in my case it was required, and even though I didn't know how to actually make sure to receive this number, I finally managed together with the company to find a solution. And again, I'm not going super in depth with how I managed to do that in this video, because I'm preparing a specific and dedicated video to how to open a bank account in France. So stay tuned for that video. But in this specific case, I just wanted to tell you that also for that specific problem, the solution is there, and it's just a matter of finding it. So the French address was, as you can see, one of the other elements in the list. And at the very beginning, I couldn't provide it. So at the very beginning, I provided my Italian address to the company, telling them that as soon as I was going to find an alternative solution with a French address, I was going to communicate it to them. And finally, the French phone number. So for the French phone number, I have to say that luckily within European Union, there is the roaming service, meaning that for the first month and a half, 2 months, I used my Italian number, because usually with the packages, with the mobile packages that we have right now, usually when you travel within European Union, if you come from a European Union country, you can still use your number to call your your home country without any extra fee, usually, but always check with your mobile services provider. The problem is for French people that want to call you because they may pay extra fees. And so for me, one of the things that I needed to put into place as soon as I moved to France was a French phone number. Of course, in case of extra emergency, you could browse online and activate a French phone number. But even in that specific case, you cannot activate subscriptions, I think, because if I remember correctly, even to activate a French phone subscription, you need a French address. But you could, for example, try to activate a prepaid SIM card that you can change once you arrive here. Of course, if you do that, always remember to edit all the information that you change on your personal area within the social security system. But in terms of the communication with the company, for the very, very beginning, a European phone number could actually be enough. But always make sure with the company if that's okay for them or if they require specifically a French phone number. So we reached the bottom of the list. We went over all the list of documents that the company required in order to proceed with the creation of my job contract. I'm not gonna lie, when I received this email, I freezed because I realized that it was not going to be not as easy as I thought, because I never thought it was gonna be easy, but I was absolutely not aware of all the documents I needed to provide. And again, some of them I was able to obtain them before moving to France. Some of them I needed to keep the process going after I moved to France. So the goal of this video again was to try to convey as much as information as I can to whoever is in the same situation I was 1 year ago when I received this email and I had no idea of where to start with these documents. So my advice is always try to have a communication flow with the company and be proactive in telling them whenever you don't have a specific document to provide and asking them for support and for help in order to try to find the best solution possible for both of you. I think it's cleaning day upstairs. And finally, just to let you know that even though it may seem scary, even though it may seem overwhelming because there are so many things you have to put into place and you still haven't moved to the country, just want to let you know that it's possible. You can do it. You just need to trust the process. So of course, if you have additional questions or if there are some details you would like to explore a little more in depth, just leave them in the comments. And of course, if you like the content and found this video helpful, click on the like button, but most of all, subscribe to the channel and click on the little bell in order to stay updated on when I will post the next video, where we will keep going even more in depth on all the process that actually brought me to finally be able to move to Paris. So as usual, I send you my best wishes for your job research process or your move into France process, and see you in the next video.